Hare Krishna, everyone. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, or Dandavat Pranams. I say that every time, based on which mat or which sangha you're in. I want to talk a bit today, and it will be brief because it's very difficult to get certain information about certain historical figures. But I want to talk a bit today about Bhagavata das Babaji. He's not probably a personality that many of you have heard about, but Bhagavata das Babaji played an important part in relatively recent history in terms of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Some of you know that I'm spending time at the moment writing the chapter about the issue of spiritual inheritance. Looking at this idea of Diksha, initiation, of Shiksha, the differences between Diksha and Shiksha, and how in the line of Acharyas, in what we could call the Sarasvat line, is actually more strongly connected via Shiksha than Diksha. Even though most mats today, such as ISKCON and others, the International Prabhu Bhakti Yoga Society, the Sri Chaitanya Saraswat mat, the Gopinath Gaudiya mat, the Chaitanya Gaudiya mat, a lot of them place a lot of emphasis on Diksha. Actually, the Acharya line that we're following in most of our mats is actually connected via Shiksha. Some of you might remember that some time ago on this Facebook page, I posted a piece of research that I put together tracing back the gurus and the acharyas in our line back to 1697. I was having different people, different spiritual leaders telling me different things about how the modern day Hare Krishna movement came into existence and who we hail from ultimately, where we come from, our own spiritual inheritance. And I managed to trace back the line of acharyas that ISKCON and other mats follows back to 1697. I spoke in a video the other day talking about the Gaudiya mat. Thank you to everyone who watched that film. That was great that so many of you did, and you felt free to send me comments and to share that film with others as well. I talked a bit in that film about how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had created, or put together rather, the line of acharyas that most of us see on the altar at different Gaudiya Vaishnav temples around the world. Faithful followers will pray to those images, if you like, of those murtis, of those pictures of the acharyas to ask for blessings. And I talked a bit the other day about how that line was put together based on the foundation of the Gaudiya mat in 1918, and how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to put together a lineage of teachers, if you like, that we could all follow. I've talked a bit before on this page about Bipin Goswami, who was a very important individual. He was the Diksha Guru of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. That's not a shocking new revelation anymore. Many of you who follow this page will know that. Jagannath Das Babaji was the Shiksha Guru to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and the Diksha Guru to Bhaktivinoda Thakur was Bipin Goswami, who was in the Nityananda Jahnavi line of teachers. So very briefly, I want to talk a bit today about Bhagavata das Babaji. So who was Bhagavata das Babaji? Well, we're filling in some more missing links today, because Bhagavata das Babaji was what you could say, or the terminology you could use, he was the Diksha Guru to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. I'll just let that sink in for a moment before we carry on, because I know all these names can be a bit overwhelming. So Bhagavata das Babaji was what we could say the Diksha Guru to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. So in the line that most of us follow, problem with having the laptop up is different messages come up. I've deleted it now. So in the line that we follow, in the line that we recognise, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was a Diksha disciple. We know that, of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. Before Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, we've got Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the Shiksha Guru to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. And then before Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you've got Jagannath Das Babaji. So another missing link that we can fill in today is Bhagavata Das Babaji. Bhagavata Das Babaji was the Diksha Guru, if you like, to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. So any of you who have read the stories, and if any of you who have read that one, watched that amazing film that Bhakti Charu Swami put together, I think it was 9 hours, about the life of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, we'll remember seeing, obviously it was an actor, but we'll remember seeing images of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji in the woods, in the forest. He was a renounced personality, and he would be always chanting as a Babaji in the woods the names of God, the names of the Lord. But that wasn't how his life started out. We know that Gaur Kishore Das Babaji was married, and it was about 30 years old that he experienced the death of his wife. His wife died when Gaur Kishore Das Babaji was 30 years old, and then he then decided to live a much more renounced order in life, and he accepted what is referred to as Babaji Vesh from Bhagavata Das Babaji. So Babaji Vesh is another way of saying sannyas, or they entered the sannyas ashram. In the Sarasvat line, we would call it the sannyas ashram. In other lines, predominantly more in the Nityananda line, Babaji Vesh would be a term that's more commonly used. So Bhagavata Das Babaji was the guru of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, and Bhagavata Das Babaji was actually a disciple of Sri Jagannath Das Babaji. So just let that sink in. So we know the first image in that line of acharyas is Sri Jagannath Das Babaji. If any of you ever looked at the dates in terms of the appearance date and the disappearance date of Sri Jagannath Das Babaji, he lived for a very, very long time. He's known as the commander-in-chief of the Vaishnavas, the first in that lineage of teachers that most of us in the Sarasvat line will follow. Different biographies give different dates, but generally we believe he lived for about 120 years, roughly from 1776, which ironically was actually the year of American independence, and he didn't leave this world until 1894. So he lived for around 120 years. He was known as the commander-in-chief of the Vaishnavas. He was the Shiksha Guru to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he was the guru to Bhagavata Das Babaji. What we're aware of now in terms of our understanding of the modern day Hare Krishna movement is that when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was creating the Gaudiya Mat, which all the groups today, most of the groups today come from, he wanted to put together a line of acharyas, or a line of teachers that we could pray to, that we could follow, that we could, if you like, put our faith in. We don't often use that expression in Krishna consciousness and Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but to put our faith in. There's a lot of emphasis today put on the importance of Diksha, and Diksha is very important. One of the foundational points of our life is to recognize that we're not the body. This body isn't who we really are. We're eternal spiritual beings, and the point of the opportunity we have in human life is to go back to Godhead, is to try and become God conscious, try and become Krishna conscious. And one of the ways to do that is to surrender to someone who's more advanced than us, to follow in the footsteps, to follow and take the advice and the guidance of a spiritual master or a spiritual teacher. A lot of organizations like ISKCON will put an emphasis on Diksha initiation. That's where through an official ceremony, one is initiated. Somebody will receive new beads, a new name from an initiating guru, and that guru who is living will be a link to the previous Acharya. So if that's ISKCON, that's A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. If you're initiated by Bhaktivedanta Nemi Maharaj in the International Pure Bhakti Yoga Society, you know, you will, through being initiated by him, you will be linked through the parampara to the gurus in that way. So different mats will put emphasis on Diksha, but Shiksha is also important. As we know, this line of acharyas that Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur put together had a lot of emphasis on Shiksha. So there isn't actually much we can say about Bhagavata das Babaji because we don't know much about him. He was a contemporary of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he was the term we can use is Diksha Guru, because there was some kind of ceremony. He was the Diksha Guru to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, who was the Diksha Guru of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. In most publications produced by ISKCON predominantly, and I'm sure in other mats well, you'll often find kind of a line of disciplic succession here. So Gaur Kishore Das Babaji is here, number 30. Does that work properly? And, you know, this line here, a lot of this is obviously via Shiksha because, you know, there's often 100 years or so separating these individuals. So in the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the emphasis on Shiksha and Diksha was actually equal. They were seen as kind of contemporary to each other. Your Diksha Guru and your Shiksha Guru complemented one another, and it was important to have both. Often it's the same individual. Your Diksha Guru is also your Shiksha Guru. So there we are, some information today about Bhagavata das Babaji, the Diksha Guru to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. Thank you. Hare Krishna.